I want to bring in former Education Secretary under President Obama, Arne Duncan. Secretary Duncan also served as the CEO of Chicago's public schools. Now he's managing partner at the Emerson Collective. Mr. Secretary, it's very nice to see you tonight. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me.
Let's start where we left this conversation off. You are pushing for, and you can explain this as well, students to essentially say, I'm not going back to school unless I feel safe. Do you think it's at the point where the groundswell might be enough politically because it's affecting such a wide array of students, of children in America, that there could be significant changes on something that's been so calcified here in Washington?
Well, I think we have to create a tension that hasn't existed yet. And I think only that kind of creative tension can push people to confront an issue that they've been able to run away from, to hide from for so long. I think, again, we're just at a fork in the roads as a nation. Either this body count, this loss of life, the killing of innocent children is acceptable or it's not. And if we decide it's unacceptable, then we have to do some things we have never done before, because everything we've done to this point has been a failure, has been ineffective. So it's time to think much more radically. It's time to do things very differently if we want to break through and make just not our children, but every citizen of America much, much safer than they are today.
So what should be done? I mean, there is, and one of our panelists has raised the point that, every time something like this happens, legislation is proposed that's often targeted to, change a database or ban a bump stock. But at the end of the day, those measures in the most recent shootings we have dealt with would not have stopped in this particular situation. If even those small changes can't get through, I mean, how is it possible that something more sweeping could be done?
Well, again, we have to be much more radical than we ever have, so we can't just keep doing the same things. So teachers have walked out and had strikes to raise pay, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Our young people, led by Florida, have walked out. It's time for us as parents. It's time for us to step up. We're failing to protect our children and say enough is enough. Something has to happen. And you think about, again, it's a radical idea. It's controversial. It is intentionally provocative. But you think about as we go back to school after Labor Day, with the November elections just right behind that. What if young people were to say, we're not going back to school? What if young people and their parents would work together to try and get major legislation passed? And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, hold those elected officials accountable. We have to do something so different than we've ever done if we expect different results.
What would you propose the legislation should include that could stop these things?
It's very simple, and again, it's not going to stop every shooting. Your point's well taken, but there's some basic things that are, wildly supported across the political spectrum today. Criminal background checks, banning weapons of war, assault weapons, putting money into the impact of gun violence, research behind that. Those are things that are universally backed that would be so effective in reducing many, many shootings. And I have to say, I get so frustrated when people say, well, we should just harden schools. Here's my question, here's my retort to that. How do we harden recess? How do we harden dismissal time? How do we harden bus trips? Tougher question, how do we harden summer? Places like right here in Chicago where we see violence is way too high, we can't do that. We have to do something practical about guns, about the easy availability of guns. The United States has 4% of the planet's population and 42% of guns. And the level of violence, the level of heartbreak, the level of tragedy is directly proportional to just the universal access to guns to anyone who wants them.
Are there any school safety-related measures that you would support or that you would urge Democrats to support? Proposals, for example, about fewer entrances and exits, other basic things that have been applied to our airports and other places?
Yeah, that's all ticky around the margins. Let me be clear. More than 99.7% of people killed by guns last year were not in schools. So we could talk about school safety, but we have to talk about movie theaters. We have to talk about concerts. We have to talk about malls. We have to talk about people who are worshiping in church. We have to talk about congressmen who are playing baseball on a baseball field. So all of that, again, is just minor. It's tinkering. It's almost a smokescreen. We have to look at the real issue. And I will say that our young people, led by students from Parkland, Florida, south and west sides of Chicago, June 15th, are going to start to lead a march. Going to start to fan out across the country, do voter registration, do town halls. And our young people, hopefully partner with us as parents, have to step up take the country in a radically different way. This level of carnage, this level of heartbreak, it's just unacceptable. We just cannot continue. We have to do something radically different as a country.
And we are, of course, already seeing heightened voter registration numbers among young people. Arnie Duncan, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.